Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bernadette, for that overly kind introduction and hospital pass of a question on Brexit. It's a real pleasure for me to be here to join you today to talk about something which is very close to my heart, this theme of language learning, cultural awareness, and its importance to our future economic success. So often we tend to talk about this subject in the context of young people's educational journey, or we talk about it in the context of culture, but we don't often talk about it in the context of prosperity and in the context of our future success. I think we need to up the volume on that, and that's why I'm delighted to be here with you today and to join you, who I know are all passionate champions for making the case for languages. As Bernadette says, I represent businesses of all sizes in every nation and region of the UK. We also now have a burgeoning network of British Chambers of Commerce operating overseas as well. So if you were to go from Manchester to Mexico City, we have a British Chamber of Commerce at either end of that journey. And one of the things that our chambers overseas are now doing, interestingly, is helping businesses get acclimated to the cultures that they are often taking their first steps in, so that they can be successful in dealing with the businesses that they encounter thereafter. How does business think about languages? Well, I think the first thing I'd say is it doesn't think about languages. It thinks about the skills of the individuals that it needs in order to achieve whatever goals it has set in its strategy. And the thing that businesses do think about is overseas experience, intercultural awareness, and from that, languages become important because, of course, languages are a great indicator of someone possessing those skill sets which businesses are after in order to expand either in the UK or into a particular overseas market. Intercultural skills of any description are also an indicator to a lot of our businesses these days of overall employability. Businesses are less and less convinced by qualifications of any description and more convinced by individuals' experiences of life, the world of work, and cultures around the world. So when they look and they say, I don't really get the difference between the academic qualifications of candidate A, candidate B, and candidate C, that intercultural experience, linguistic ability, etc., starts to become a differentiating factor for businesses in deciding who they take on. So what sorts of things do they look for? Well, experience working in or with businesses overseas is an obvious starting point. But even time spent living and working abroad, even when someone is in their youth, is something which attracts businesses' eye. Volunteering overseas is something which now increasingly attracts businesses' eye because it is another indicator of employability and also that sort of fuzzy concept of grit which a lot of employers are after. If someone has spent a spell overseas, possibly under difficult conditions, volunteering, learning about a different culture, learning another language, they see that very positively. And of course, yes, they do look at language ability as another differentiator, including but not limited to qualifications. I think what's interesting when you get away from the academic debate about languages, however, is that businesses are far less obsessed with native or fluent speakers and far more obsessed with having people on their books who can give it a go. And I think we need to differentiate between those two groups. It's very important. John did a little bit in his remarks between those who are in designated speaker roles and those who need to have a functional understanding of language. Well, those distinctions exist in business as well. If you are a frontline customer service representative needing to attend to clients in Greek, they want you to be fluent in Greek or a native speaker of Greek, obviously. But if you are in some other function within the business, for example, your level of proficiency may not have to be that perfect. And I think that's where we as Brits have got a cultural problem, which is that we are very, very reticent to use any language skills we may have acquired in public for fear of embarrassment. It's stupid, but it's true. If we can get over that, and we can start demonstrating intermediate levels of proficiency or even the sort of survival levels of proficiency, of course, the individual in question gains in confidence, but the business also starts to invest more in that individual's proficiency, and you see a virtuous sort of circle emerging. So I think one of the biggest things that businesses say to us vis-a-vis languages and the people that they have on their books, I'll use an acronym because I don't want to use the full phrase. It's JFDI. I will leave you to guess what that means. It involves a swear word or two. They want people to get out there and do it. And with languages, it's no different. They want them to get out there and use the capacity that they have for the good of the business and for their own personal advancement, and then they are willing to invest and build on it from there. So the attitudes towards business don't start from, do you have the C1 level of qualification, or have you got an A level in this subject, or whatever else it might be. It's, show me what you can do and how we can use it and why it's good for our business's future success. And when we start talking about things in that way, languages sort of come to life, I think, in the workplace a little bit. Coming on then to the trade challenge and Brexit, Bernadette's lovely question to set me up a little bit earlier. I actually think that Brexit is a huge opportunity for those of us who care about languages and language learning, and who care about the UK's ability to pay its way in the world through international trade. Many of you will know that we have a very significant current account deficit. Our trade balances are not positive in a lot of sectors, and that we need to do a lot more to get out there into the world. We in Chambers of Commerce work with well in excess of 30,000 exporting companies every year on everything from translations, foreign currency hedging, through to in-market services. We do a lot of the nitty-gritty of international trade together with businesses, but we know we need to get more of them out there, because there's still plenty of firms that aren't out there. And having language ability, having intercultural skills, the agility and the ability to adapt that those give to the individuals within a business would be a huge boon to our potential to achieve that. Markets where we have traditionally not been big players are areas where we have big opportunities. And I think first and foremost, this might be because I'm like John, I acquired Spanish through marriage, but I acquired Valencian Spanish rather than Chilean Spanish, so we may not understand each other when we talk. But the Latin American market, I think, is one where the UK has classically and traditionally underplayed its hand. 150 years ago, British products were the absolute must in many of those countries. About 50 years ago, we stopped paying attention completely, said the Spanish and the Portuguese have this all sewn up, so we'll leave it alone. Big mistake. Everyone, but everyone in those markets wants to do more business with us. So Spanish and Portuguese, hugely, hugely important, I think, to our ability to crack an area of the world where we've been traditionally less present. Obviously, a lot of our businesses are operating intensively in the Middle East, and they see Brexit actually as a push for us to do more in many of the Middle Eastern countries. The Gulf states, for example, share many of our standards for products. They use British standards. They have used a number of British concepts in their legal systems, and those similarities and those familiarities lead to Arabic being increasingly important, perhaps in the post-Brexit world, for many of our businesses. Mandarin Chinese I need not speak about, because it's obviously important to every country doing business with China, and of course for us as well. I think it will be increasingly important in future. But, and John mentioned Indonesian in particular, but the ASEAN countries are another area of the world with a great hunger to do more business with us. So if we think about the Indonesian and Malay family, we think about Thai, we think about Vietnamese, these are other areas where there may be big opportunity. And having just a small number of speakers, but who can do the business in some of these countries, could be transformative to our future prospects. Markets where we want to grow trade after Brexit, but where English is the primary business language, still need intercultural understanding in order to do business successfully. I'm, as you can probably tell from my accent, a slightly mid-Atlantic individual. I grew up half in the United States and half in this country. Doing business in the United States is a million miles away from doing business in the United Kingdom. And there are lazy assumptions among some of our businesses sometimes that going to other English-speaking countries is easy in business. Simple answer is it's not. There are regulatory differences, there are differences in standards, there are differences in business culture, which are enormous. And I was reminded of that in Australia just 2 weeks ago, when a couple of my hosts reminded me of a couple of visits that they'd had from a couple of British businesses that literally did not understand how they did business in Australia and made too many assumptions that it was like doing business at home. So having intercultural understanding derived from living overseas, language learning, etc., will help us not just in markets where we need the languages on a day-to-day basis, but where we need the cultural understanding as well. That would extend to the Indian subcontinent, to many of the African nations who use English as their business language as well. We have got to remember that that cultural understanding and that immersion is important to our businesses. So just to conclude, I don't want to leave it in any doubt. Businesses very much value language skills, but their approach to thinking about language is indirect. They think about it through their personnel needs and their strategic needs. Language then becomes an answer or part of the solution rather than what they were seeking in the first place. It's a means to an end, not an end in itself. And I think sometimes when we talk about the languages in forums like this, the language is the end in itself. For business, it is the means. We need to remember that. We do need to get far better as a country at acquiring those skills, but even more so than acquiring them, it's demonstrating them. Even if they're imperfect, show that we can do it, because that creates confidence. And in that intercultural relationship that is a business transaction, even a small and short-lived attempt to speak someone else's language often opens the door to having a contract signed or a negotiation completed. I think finally as well that Brexit will make those who have those great international and intercultural skills far more valuable on the jobs market of tomorrow. If we only have a limited pool of people who are good at doing business overseas, the law of supply and demand suggests that their wages will be higher, their premiums will be greater, and they will be sought after by many, many of our firms. So for those who are in that particular area at the moment, for those who are studying languages at the moment, my point would be this. It's great to be doing that because your market value probably will start to increase in the years to come. But if you go into the jobs market saying, I did a language degree, not going to help you. If you go into the jobs market saying, here's what I can do, and by the way, I also have qualifications in a language, you get a completely different response. And I hope we start thinking about things from that practical perspective, because that's the way we're going to get past Brexit, we're going to increase our language abilities, and we're going to increase how much business we do around the world. Thank you, everyone.